Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. It's Wednesday, March the 18th of 2020. This is a special meeting of Commissioners Court of Grimes County, Texas. It is being held at the Grimes County Annex at 114 West Buffington Avenue in Anderson, Texas, at which time the following subjects will be discussed and acted upon to wit. Meeting has been called to order. Agenda item number 2, to discuss and approve emergency services agreement between CHI St. Joseph and Grimes County. See our attachment number 2. Commissioner Walker, I'm going to ask, if you will, to take the immediate lead on this and kind of bring everybody up to date as to where we're at. And
we're certainly glad to have CHI St. Joseph here. I will let them, if you don't mind, introduce themselves.
Absolutely.
This is a talk that's been in the works for a little while, but I'm super proud of the progress we've made working collaboratively together over the last few years. You know, when we started sitting down with the EMS committee and also the commissioners, y'all were very responsive to our needs, and for that I'm grateful. So if you don't mind, would you all introduce yourselves?
Sure. And just so you folks understand, if you would speak loudly, because the room is recorded and it is videotaped, and this will be placed after the meeting's over, but it will be placed on our website for the world to see, okay?
Sure.
Just so you know.
Well, good morning. My name is Ricardo Diaz. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the St. Joseph Health System. And if you don't mind, I just want to say thank you as well, just because over the last quite a few months that we've been discussing this, I want to commend you for the interest that you have in the safety of your community.
Thank you.
I mean, I think it's in the questions that you ask, in the interest that you have in the contract. I think the community would be very proud of the high standard that you want implemented, and of course we are as well interested in delivering that to your community.
My name is Austin Jones. I'm the Vice President of Finance for St. Joseph Health System. I came here about 1.5 years ago, and so I've met some of you, but not all of you. So it's good to be here. We're very glad to be able to serve this county, and we hope to continue to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Billy Rice. I'm the new EMS Director. I'm certainly not new to this area or this region. I did my undergrad at A&M. I did my master's in Tyler, but I opened the PHI helicopter that's been here for the last 15 years, Airman 12, which is kind of very proud of, and just kind of doing now a different leadership thing from a different role and trying to build that same thing we kind of built there into the EMS team. And I think this is why Levi is here, who I'll just introduce while we're here, who's one of our field supervisors. And I think you'll see a lot more people around that. Just while I have the moment, like, I'm one of the most collaborative people that I know. I like tons of different varying opinions, and I think that is probably what's going to set us off for some really neat things in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Levi Ronick. I'm one of the field supervisors. I've been working in Grimes County for, I think this is my 9th year now. So I've been a supervisor here for 4 years. I used to work in Navasota for about 3.5 years. Just really glad to be here. Hope to continue to serve y'all.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Erin Marietta. I currently serve as the administrator for your hospital here in Grimes County, and I also oversee operations at the hospital in Madison County as well. Again, echo what everyone said, Barbara especially, we've worked very closely through this process. And I'm grateful from the hospital perspective that we have the ability to come here and offer a full service healthcare solution for the county, because we are invested highly in the healthcare and the needs of your residents in the county. So it's been a pleasure, Judge, Commissioners, to work with all of you, and I'm excited for what we have in the future.
Thank you. With that being said, we knew that this contract was expiring April 1st, 2020, and over the past it had been amended so many times, and I think that the version now is much cleaner. I'm hoping that what little nicks and kinks that we see therein we can work out today. I'm gonna turn it over to our counsel, Mr. John C. We did suggest some changes, and I guess we'll just get right into the meats of it. With Commissioner Mallett, please forgive me. Would you like to add
No,
anything
no,
to
you
the
you
conversation?
said it well.
So,
I felt that coming.
yes,
I assume that all of you have a copy of the red line version that we got yesterday evening?
No.
Is that accurate?
No, we got a red line last,
Oh,
yesterday.
yeah,
It
so
was a
I'll have
portion
somebody
of-
go make a copy of this.
I have an extra copy.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Just have one?
I have 2 red lines.
Okay. You just pass it to them.
Kat, would you like to have this taken to the front office? I know I kind of scribbled on mine. You might want to get one of hers.
Anybody else
All
need a
right,
copy?
thank you.
Anybody, St. Joe's need a copy? Need a copy?
Anyone need a red line?
Please.
We can share.
This is
That'd be 6 feet away.
I don't know how she, I mean, she went to make, but hopefully she made enough.
Yes.
So, before we get to that, we'll just talk generally then. As Commissioner Walker indicated, the contract is going to expire April the 1st. That's why we wanted to have this meeting, though some might ask why it is that, of all folks to be having a meeting, it's government and the folks at the hospital. And you got self-quarantining everywhere, and it turns out we're the ones out here. But we need to get this done, obviously. This has been a partnership between St. Joe's and the county that's existed for at least the 9 years of the contract. The proposed term that would be in this contract is the same as what existed previously, 5 years with 2 possible extensions, each for 2 years apiece. So it'd be another 9 years. So we want to get it right when we execute this new one. We obviously have the ability to do an amendment at any point if we see some change that needs to be made, some oversight or some modification that we think of later. If we were, when we're done today, if there wasn't confidence in a final document, because what they've sent to us is their red line version and said, here's what we're comfortable with, but yet we have yet to push back and say, or to respond, I guess I should better say, we're okay with those changes or we're not okay with those changes. And it appears that you all haven't seen those changes or not aware of what those specific changes are. So if we can't hammer it out today with an approval at the end of court conditioned upon my office ironing out whatever minor details may be left, we could still do an amendment to extend the contract for a month, or whatever period is appropriate. So the contract that exists now, we could extend from April 1st to May 1st. I mean, you can do that as long as the parties are in agreement. The question would be, what would be the rates? And that really is, I think, the issue for St. Joe's maybe. But given the current circumstance, folks not being able to be at their computers, or folks not being at the office, if that happens, it's not end of the world. So just keep that in mind. I don't want anybody to be pressed so that we end up with a bad deal, or a deal that you're not comfortable with, or a deal that they're not comfortable with, because we feel like there's so much urgency it has to be done today. Now, there is the additional issue that I asked, I think Austin may be here to talk about that, and that's the 1115 waiver. Some of you may have heard that discussion. I can tell you that it's always been over my head. I've tried my hardest to wrap my brain around the things we're talking about. And some of it started when I understood that we were that we couldn't have a contract in writing when it came to ambulance service. And it just blew my mind. I didn't understand how we could operate with an agreement for the benefit of the people of Grimes County and not have something in writing. And it was mandated that it be that way in order for them to get whatever the funding is that they get as part of the 1115 waiver. I understand that may not necessarily be the case now, but that's what's always blown my mind about it. If you want to get into that discussion before we hammer out the contract while we're waiting on the copies, then I think Austin may be here for that reason.
And I'd like to add, I think Cherie did send out the original version of the contract and then the proposed version, so they.
Yeah, the red line came in, I think, at 5:40. I
Yes.
saw it at 5:40 yesterday evening.
Yes.
I was able to print it this morning. That's why I was late. Is that okay? Do you want to hear? Is that okay with you, Austin?
Yes, sir.
I want to throw you under the bus.
No, not at all. Prepared to speak
If
on
you could
that.
just give us a broad overview and where we are with it.
Let's, I'll give you a broad overview of kind of the history of waiver. as well as how it relates to the county and St. Joe's. So what the waiver is, you've heard about the Medicaid expansion, I'm sure. That was a hot topic in really even the presidential race. Big factor between red and blue states. It's an element that you expand Medicaid. Typically, it comes with the state tax. We currently don't have that. We're tax averse in Texas, as well as most of our counties, including Grimes. So, in order to draw down federal support for Medicaid in particular, as well as unfunded, but primarily Medicaid, the state of Texas said, we're not going to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, but what we're going to do is propose a waiver, and under this waiver, you're going to give us a certain amount of money and we're going to comply. So the federal government said, all right, we'll go ahead and give you this $3 billion. That's how much they give the state of Texas. And then the Health and Human Services Commission of Texas decides how they're going to divvy that up. Now, in order to draw down that $3 billion, the caveat is the state has to put up 48% of it. So that's what we call the federal matching percentage. So really, we're only getting about 52% of that in true net. And what they said was the hospitals themselves can't put this up. It has to come from a governmental source. Governmental source can be Texas A&M, we have an affiliation with them. It can come from a hospital district, like we do in Burleson, or it can come from a county, as we do in a lot of our other counties.
As in Grimes.
Yes, sir. And so, when this took place many years ago, we looked at a lot of the things we were doing with counties, and we said, listen, we can't put this money up. The state of Texas is not going to levy a tax on its citizens in order to put this up. We have to figure out some kind of way to provide value and recognize that value, and in return, you put up this governmental transfer. It's referred to as an IGT, intergovernmental transfer, so you'll hear that acronym come up. And so some of our hospitals that we weren't leasing, we entered into a lease agreement. We said, okay, we're going to start paying you $550,000 because it's fair market value. It's a normal transaction that would be qualified. And in return, because you now have this influx of cash into your budget, we appreciate if you would put up this money. Now the thing was, it couldn't be we pay you rent, therefore you're going to pay this IGT, because that would be deemed quid pro quo. So in order to make sure that it wasn't falling outside of what was constituted as kind of a fair and reasonable IGT, what they said was, we're going to use this to cover all of the indigent care, all the ambulance service that you provide currently, and any kind of unfunded care that you're providing for our citizens. And so in most of our counties, we have these arrangements. And so currently, the county of Grimes, I believe the exact amount is 550. It's right around there. It's 500 to 550 is what they put up. And our lease happens to be, based on historical rates, about 500 to 550. So that's still a legitimate transaction. It hasn't been disqualified, and it's very common throughout the state. But it's something that is still in place, and as you said, it's not something that we have in writing where we say the county's going to put this up on our behalf. What we do have in writing, and what we have submitted to HHSC upon their request in December, is what's called an affiliation agreement. And we have 88 of these for just St. Joe's. They're all across the state. There's over 1,000 in the state of Texas. CMS requested these affiliation agreements, and they said, we want to review these and determine whether they're falling within our guidelines of what we deem reasonable. There weren't any concerns. They really haven't got back and said that any of them were outside of the guidelines. There were some in Dallas that were deemed to be illegal or out of the guidelines that they'd set forward. And so that's what's created a little bit of focus on these affiliation agreements. Our affiliation agreement is pretty vague, as most of them are. When the law is vague and it requires something of it, we in turn have a pretty vague contract. But it basically says we're going to provide indigent care and not bill the county. We've done so in the 9 counties that we serve. So that's kind of where we're at, and I don't know if we've had any requests to put something in a contract. I know our attorneys haven't requested that, but
Could you tell us how the emergency service contract, one we're looking at today, the county's not paying any cost or paying any dollars for that? Is that related to the IGT?
It was in the initial kind of fact-finding to determine where value from St. Joseph Health System that would normally be billed to a county, that was an element of it. But it's not named to say we're providing this much value, therefore we're going to allocate this many dollars. But yes, sir, it's an aspect of it.
Okay, well, and what it reminds me of is that we have this contract with St. Joe's. We're not paying any consideration to get the promises that they're making to us. And so basically, it calls into question the enforceability of the contract, but at the same time, my preference would be we have some standard to abide by. We also, though, if you keep in mind, we have had the opportunity previously to be able to terminate this. I think it was on 90 days notice. One of the changes that's on the red line version is to remove that. And so you'd be able to terminate if there was breach by St. Joe's, but short of that, you're looking at waiting for the expiration of the term. So that's something to keep in mind here. If we're believing that we're bound by a contract that some could question the enforceability of because there's no consideration being paid, we're tying our hands to say we're going to stay in that. Would St. Joseph have the ability to walk away if they chose to do that? Just, it's a thought of mine. It's probably too much legalese, too many legal considerations for you. I know that this is somewhat of a symbiotic relationship, and I don't foresee that that's going to be the case that St. Joe's would walk, but I keep that in mind as we're talking about the red line version, the proposed changes that they've made. Do you want to have an out? Do you want to have an opportunity where you can walk away if need be? And I think you've got too much invested and they've got too much invested for anybody to just throw up their hands and say we're walking away on 90 days notice or whatever it may be. Any commissioners, Judge, do you have questions for
Well,
Austin?
I guess one of the things that if we're putting this together on the thought process of the 1115 waiver, whether that's the right term or not, but
The best I can do.
yeah, but the 1115 waiver, our relationship with BV Cog, you know, they were handling it for a while or for a long while, and now they're not handling it through the BV Cog, and I don't have any factual, I don't have anything other than the hearsay that we don't know how long this 1115 is going to continue. So I guess one of my concerns is that if we get into some type of an agreement and we don't have an out process on it, and 1115 goes away, then there's some concerns that I think we would have financially. Because if you folks are paying us rent to about $500,000, and we're contributing $500,000, if the rent goes away, the contribution could go away, but we still need to provide for the citizens in our county, emergency services and things of that sort. So I don't know if I'm looking at the right way or the wrong way, but it's almost a catch-22 for the time being, since we don't have any guarantees how long the government's the feds are gonna be involved in our business. Normally, the sooner they're out of it, the better we like it, but as long as they're giving us money, we can tolerate it.
That's a good point. Austin, you got something to say on that? What would happen in that instance, if you know, what would St. Joe's position be?
Yeah, so our position would be, and it's been this way not only in our conversations with other counties and hospital districts, but also Texas A&M. We just got done having a conversation with them about this. And it was simply, there's always going to be uncertainty, especially with the federal government. Even when you have an administration that is aligned with your values, the sub-administrators within that administration, which is what we're facing right now with CMS, may not see things the same way as previously. And so with that measure of uncertainty, I think we have to be aware of some of those risks like you're talking about, Judge. It is a risk, but what we've decided is that we're going to set up arrangements that can be budget neutral both as it's active and when it's deactivated. And so in this case, what I would suggest is in a budget neutral situation, if, for example, the IGT was no longer necessary, we could do one of two things. Number one, we could reduce the rent to $1, We do have that in some counties, and so that will be budget neutral for us, and then the county would no longer put up any kind of IGP. Budget neutral both ways, we would still serve the county. Number one, I think we don't serve the county because we have these arrangements. We serve the county because there's a need and there's also value, so there's supply and demand.
Yeah, but if the value's not there, the need goes away pretty quickly. I mean, we might still have the need, but if there's no value for you guys, you're not gonna participate in it.
Yeah, I think the value is in the actual healthcare business here.
And I think it's important to note St. Joseph's been committed to the communities that we serve for a long time. What you're discussing or what you bring up in regards to the 1115 waiver changes is somewhat transformational in nature, right? And the reality is that a conversation of that level would require us to sit down again in a continued partnership like we have for many years and have an honest conversation about what's sustainable, because our goal is continue taking care of all of these people that we've been taking care of for some time. I mean, that's our mission, that's what we do. We work hard and not turn away people. So it's a hard question to answer with a definitive plan.
And in all fairness, and I appreciate, for the record, I am very pleased to have St. Joe's Hospital in Navasota, which services the citizens of Grimes County. Let the record show that, and everyone here be aware of that. But St. Joe's is not the St. Joe's it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because you now have a new owner. And the only reason, generally the only reason an asset gets bought is somebody's going to turn it around and keep it as a value property. And if you guys turn out not to be a value property, they'll make that decision because their relationship is up here, not down here. I appreciate the mission statement and the friendships and the relationships that we have working within the county. And I met Erin, I think, right after she came in, and we've had good conversation. I met you once upon a time, although you didn't provide coffee at our meeting. But I don't carry a grudge. But I remember. But, you know, so things continue to change, and, you know, what we desire and what we prefer, and I'm talking about the administration of your organization and this court, sometimes it gets out of our control, and we're left, you know, with egg on our face. The sad part is we get left without providing the citizens of this county with the emergency relief that they have come to expect, and we know that they need. And our current times just reinforce that so much more. So I want you folks to understand that I'm glad to have St. Joe's here, and I wouldn't want to do anything that would jeopardize that relationship where you guys said, we're out of Grimes, you know, we're going to shut down Navasota, and, you know, if we need to, we'll just transport them up to Bryan College Station. And I know those are decisions that can be made. I'm not suggesting that's a decision that I would desire, and I don't think anybody on this court would like the hospital to leave. But we're dealing with some uncertainties here, and they're fairly significant financial uncertainties, so.
And I think, you speak to the fact that, I think you speak really well to the fact that when so many people depend on a service and a relationship like we've had for many years, I think a continued good working relationship with a level of transparency on the health of that is necessary. And that's really, it's hard for us to articulate in a meeting like this where we can say, hey, let's quantify it and put it in a contract and say, we're going to show you X, Y, Z, and that'll give you the comfort level moving forward. That will be at least for the next 5 years. But I do think that as we hopefully take steps to formalize and finalize this contract, the information that we finalize and agree upon will give you the ability to look into the operations and say, hey, we're heading down a continued path of a good, healthy relationship. That's part of the goal. When we talk about metrics, when we talk about operations and so forth, we're gonna put in here, we're gonna provide in our working relationship the honest truth about the sustainability of the operations, because that's necessary. So it's an ongoing conversation.
Sure.
Well, and keep in mind, we have a lease for the building, and then we have this contract for emergency services. So there's two different things on the table. I don't know what the expiration date or the termination date is on that lease, if anybody knows, but I suspect we have many years left.
Yeah, we have a few years left.
Okay. All right. And so those things may work together, this agreement and the lease agreement, if and when that day comes where the IGT is in question. But I suspect we'd all continue to work that way. But you're right, it's a business decision for
Yeah.
CHI. I mean, it's not all about, you know, how it makes you feel. So let me say, one of the things that certainly could be seen as binding consideration, or consideration sufficient to make this emergency service contract binding, is that you're granting St. Joe's exclusive right to provide emergency services or ambulance services in the county. And that brings up the other issue we talked about, the helicopter and the offer from Washington County to
Right.
Provide those services, which would also be rescue services, not just ambulance services. We need to address that and get St. Joe's perspective on that. And if it is the case that Washington County has a helicopter that's available, if you sign an agreement with them, that may very well violate this agreement or breach this agreement. If you don't sign an agreement with Washington County, but you have circumstances where in an emergency, let's say PHI is not available or whatever, and you use that helicopter over there, I don't know that that's necessarily a breach. If you use them, if you use Washington County for a rescue, if they when they have those services available, I don't think that's a breach of this agreement. So obviously Washington County is represented. They want you to sign a deal that gives them the right to do transports for medical purposes so that they can get compensation to offset the rescues or things they may not get compensation for. That then makes it difficult in light of the fact that you're looking at making this an exclusive relationship for St. Joe's. So having said that, I think we need to hear from St. Joe's, their perspective on that possible arrangement. And I will say to the folks from St. Joe's, the judge may have had multiple conversations with the folks from Washington County, only because I think people typically approach the judge first before things get on the agenda, and other folks of the other members of the court may have had those. There's been, as far as I know, only one presentation here in Commissioner's Court, and that was by the, I don't even know what his role was, what his title is in Washington
He's the
County.
head of their EMS. I had a meeting with the head of their EMS and also their county judge over at my office area, but then after I heard what they had to say, I liked what they had to say about the full rescue operation, then we invited them to come to Commissioner's Court and make a presentation of what they could offer the county.
Yeah, and that's as far as it's gone to this point,
That's right.
because we wanted to have this conversation.
Sure.
And I don't think they're all aware of the conversation that Washington County, what their presentation was. Also, PHI also did a presentation too about subscriptions. The presentation from Washington County was they were building, and I think you may be aware of it. David Lilly is back there, who was also in the meeting. We've been approached with the proposal of this Washington County building a program, EMS program, aeromedic program, that does three things. It's search and rescue, it's water rescue, is that right, Mr. Lilly? And it's also fire suppression and EMS services. The part, they're still building, it hasn't started operating yet, and as it does, it will be done in phases. And their first phase would be EMS services. And then in a year or two, I think it's rescue and search and those other aspects of it. We told them that we have an exclusive contract with CHI. You all dispatch your medics when you feel that it needs to be done. That it's something that we don't dispatch for you all. If I'm correct in that, we don't dispatch for you all. So it sounded like a really great idea, but because of the contract that we have, we told them that we would like to approach you all with it and get feedback from you all as to how you view what you do. I think that in the past, and what I see in here is we have mutual aid with other counties. We have an agreement with Montgomery County, and we also just recently started, you all agreed to start running a truck out of your facility in Brazos County. And so there are those items in here that address mutual aid. I don't know if you see that as mutual aid or what, but I guess that's pretty much where we are. We're trying to include that conversation that we've been having in the conversations as we enter into this contract. But we know that in the past that you all have been our exclusive provider, and you oversee those operations and dispatch. So that's where we are.
So I'll share with you, I think our point of view is we've always taken healthcare, we've always approached it as a continuum of care. And so for non-healthcare individuals, what that means is we take pride in taking care of that patient throughout their entire stays, regardless of whether the patient's getting taken care of, getting picked up at home, going to the ER, going to a level 3 trauma center, but then they maybe need to go to a level 2 trauma center, and we do that really well, and we do it in an integrated fashion. When we offer and when we put a proposal in front of you to take care of your 911 patients, one of the things that we provide is the AirMed services, AirMed 12 services. That's part of the continuum of care. Part of that is you got physicians, trauma surgeons, ER doctors that are all kind of aligned into how we can best take care of these patients as quickly as possible for those unusual circumstances where speed truly is of the essence.
Sure.
And I think that Bill can get into some of those specifics if you all desire with specific patient care issues in which an integrated healthcare system makes sense and it makes a difference, a clinical outcome difference, because communication matters. From our point of view, exclusivity is important. It is important from the perspective of being able to utilize our services first and foremost the majority of the time. During times in which there is a need for mutual aid, like you're describing, and for example, in a situation where we just have a disaster situation or we just can't get to those patients because of multiple emergencies happening in other counties, the assistance of other qualified healthcare providers, we always welcome, and we always, sometimes it's provided to them as well. I mean, it's not, I think we're a small community that depends on each other at times. We have resources that sometimes get depleted. So from our point of view, we would look at this exclusivity as being important in the contract for both the trucks, what I call the trucks, and then the helicopter for your county, with, I think, the understanding that there will be a mutual aid agreement for some of these other services if they're needed. We would not, I think our desire is to be the primary provider, that if there was a need for somebody else to step in because of resources being overwhelmed or capabilities not being able to be provided by us, we would absolutely reach out to somebody that's qualified that can provide those resources.
Yeah. May I make?
Sure.
So from a financial perspective, some of the implications of that language in the contract, they're pretty big. With us having a critical access designation on this hospital, it's a gym. It's like what a taxi driver's gold plate was in New York City back in the day, right? So it is coveted, and you can't produce more of them, and once you lose it, you can't get it back. And so we have that in Burleson County, in Madison County, and in Grimes County. What we didn't have in our Belleville facility was that critical access designation. And the reason why we had to transition the operations of it were, there's really 3 critical things that we determined in our analysis as we were going through the discernment process of staying in that community. The first thing is a critical access designation. So for a hospital of this size, the critical access designation brings a supplemental payment that pays 101% of cost. And so that adds another $4 to $5 million. We definitely don't even make anywhere close to that. So without that, it shuts down, right? The second thing is we have to have the community support, meaning we can't have a county that is split between two hospitals because there's another hospital in the county south of here that is a little too close and it's encroaching, because that just pulls the market share. The counties aren't densely populated enough to support it. The third thing that's also critical is EMS support. If we have split EMS support, then that also pulls away that critical mass that we have to have in order to keep a hospital operated. And so that allows us to continue to support the county. Just the 24/7 cost of these trucks and the crew, as well as the AirMed 12, is so high that we have to have that exclusive on the primary side. Of course, if we can't respond, as Ricardo said, we're gonna take care of the patients through these affiliation agreements, but it is absolutely critical to our mission here in order to have that primary coverage.
And if I may as well, from the hospital operations standpoint, having that cohesive and continuum of care and operations with our EMS service is vital to patient safety. You know, we have a very, very streamlined process when patients enter into our Grimes Hospital for strokes or STEMIs, or we can very quickly dispatch and get those patients safely transferred and get them to a higher level trauma facility or whatever their care may be, because we've got that very seamless continuum of care. And so not to say that that's not viable with another provider, but that's just critical to us in maintaining that high level of care.
Well, one of the, and David Lilly, correct me if I'm wrong, because you were in the first meeting, I think, were you not? And then the presentation? Okay. One of the, part of their sales pitch was that, particularly on the helicopter, because the question never came up about ground ambulance service. You know, St. Joe's EMS is still first call, and there was no offer or consideration of units coming out of Waller County to transport personnel. What they also said, and is it Keith, the gentleman? Billy's his name?
Casey Ping or Kevin Dramus?
Kevin.
One of those.
Yeah. Kevin said that, you know, on a helicopter transport, they're not interested in taking them to Belleville, to that hospital over there. Their focus would be to continue to bring it to either St. Joe's in Navasota, or probably if air support was called, they'd go ahead and take them to Bryan College Station, where I believe it's a higher level of service for critical care. Is that okay, Aaron? So the idea would be that you wouldn't lose that medical opportunity. Yes, you would lose that transport opportunity. And I know there's probably fairly significant financial gain of having that air transport capability, or getting the funding or the reimbursement for that, because I don't know, what's a truck cost to go from Navasota to Bryan College Station? Is that a $3,000 charge?
Approximately
It should be.
2,500 somewhere.
Okay, around, say, 3,000, and if it's air transport, it might be a $30,000 charge. Is that right?
It's more expensive.
It's more
I would say
expensive than
that
the
it's
third?
More, yeah, that's a,
Well, and, okay, so, you know, part of it is, if we have the, I said Waller earlier, I should have said Washington. If we had the Washington County Air Support, you know, the way they're going to run it, then they would get that financial benefit, because they're just gonna, you know, focus on somebody's insurance. So I don't really see any benefit to our insurance, which is a concern that we have to be aware of, whether our rates go up or not, that we have for our employees. I don't think there's much difference whether it's going to be PHI or Washington County doing the air transport. The issue that I find appealing as a county judge is that we can get the medical with Washington County, but we also get the fire suppression, the high water rescue, and they said, and if available, if we needed to have that helicopter for criminal search or investigation, we would have that opportunity, which is something that PHI does not have the ability to offer.
Sure. I think from our perspective, there's probably another piece to the puzzle, which is quickness to response. It's a seamless team from the perspective of our St. Joseph EMS and then St. Joseph AirMed. That's one component that I think it's tough to duplicate with a separate agency coming into play, with the fact that it's essentially, you're looking at 9 counties now working seamlessly with our 911 trucks on the outlying areas, and now all of a sudden carving something out from I think from a protocol perspective. That's one thing to consider. The second piece is, again, truthfully, we would have to model out the, essentially the financial impact of what that would do of carving out AirMed. And the tough part about that is we've also invested in a level 2 trauma program in Bryan. We've invested in 24/7 advanced practitioners to be around that trauma program. We've invested in orthopedic traumatologists to take care of those patients. We've invested in 4 Mayo-trained neurosurgeons being at St. Joseph. Some of those
You're no longer
patients-
talking English because I'm not understanding
Well,
what some of
so
those features
We've
are.
invested in some physicians that rely on these patients coming in so that they can continue to take care of highly sick, hurt people.
Okay.
And the potential of losing those patients to be taken care of by these highly qualified physicians and nurses and providers hurts, truthfully. And so from our perspective, I think we would have to really sit down and look at the impact. My initial reaction is that it wouldn't be beneficial on the medical side of things. It wouldn't creatively say that's a win, that's going to help out immediately. And so we just have to talk through it a lot more. I think our stance clearly is going to be, we'd like to maintain exclusivity with 911 trucks, and then also in the transports, and also the AirMed component. And then, if the county needs these other services that this other air ambulance team can provide, I think that's, a longer term strategic discussion to see how we might be able to partner with them. But I'm not sure, I don't know, and that's mostly y'all's conversation with them. But that's our initial reaction, I think, when it comes to changing the way that we provide that care, because I think we look at it comprehensively with these two teams being tied together.
Can I have operational perspective?
Sure.
So, it's important to me to have control of building a clinical spectrum from the 911 call center so that you don't have to get bumped from 3 different people. That we can move clinical information through our communicators all the way to the end spectrum of the patient getting discharged. Just last week, we used Herman LifeFlight twice out of our hospital in Bryan. We use LifeFlight on a pretty regular basis in Grimes County. Now,
Yesterday.
with the language is written, we use Aerovac Life Team on occasion. The problem, and we do that whenever and wherever that's appropriate, on a pretty regular basis.
Because you only have one vehicle, right?
We do, correct. Yeah. I mean, we have some backup spares, but we operate one aircraft.
Right. That's what I'm.
Where we run into problems clinically is we never really have control or good follow-up on quality on the back end of those flights. So if we don't control the protocol, we don't control the standard of care, the training of the crews, how it integrates into the system. And so where we've run into issues, especially further out in some of the rural communities where, say, an ambulance requests an aircraft because it has blood products, and an aircraft shows up that doesn't have blood products, that puts our entire spectrum really in a bind, and maybe decisions should have been made earlier where that patient wasn't flown at all. Those are the things that pop into my head. Exclusive, as written operationally in the contract, to me just gives us the ability to assign those flights out where they're appropriate, which I think we already do. And we can always do quality assurance on the back end of that, if that is helpful.
Billy, when Billy says quality assurance, he's talking about a group of how many doctors in one room?
The trauma surgeons?
Yeah.
I think there were 6.
6 trauma surgeons, some of those specialists, ER doctors, their team, to talk about the patient that showed up on a highway somewhere all the way through. I mean, that's when I talk about the investment that we made, that's what I'm referring to. So people that are taking the time to truly discuss it and make it better as a team.
Which is unavailable outside of Texas Medical Center or Temple. So we're the only place in between.
And we've also made a pretty, we haven't talked with Washington County formally from an operational perspective. They're new, we're kind of giving them time. I've worked with Kevin since I was a paramedic in Washington County back in 1996.
Well, he mentioned you and was complimentary of you, so. you know.
Yeah, we go way back.
Yeah.
And we did invite a few of their clinical staff members into the cadaver lab that we teach. We teach it 2 or 3 times a year at a huge expense, just because we have the capability to set that up and build that. So I think we're making the attempt to make all of those pieces kind of fall into place. It would make me nervous to change the language on something I think that we're probably working towards and doing as it is.
And I wanted to say, in the presentation, keep in mind that Washington County is still building this program. I didn't hear them say they're already activated and already servicing the area. This is all building a spectrum. As far as the search and rescue, EMS, they have not even begun that portion of it. Then 2 years from now, then they said they would do search. So there's time, I think, in the future to discuss what Washington County is doing, to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, them having conversations with CHI. There's still a lot of moving parts to me on their part that I would not want to compromise a relationship with St. Joseph, not knowing where Washington County is actually going. What, like, for one of the things they talked about, blood and those type of things on the unit. We have not heard all of the little nuts and bolts in the works that how that's going to operate together. So as far as this contract, I think that's a talk to be had, just like any other contracts, like the 1115 waiver. There's going to be times we're going to be periodically, which is one of the components of this contracts, is that we're going to meet more regularly, quarterly, to discuss things that as they come up, if we need to make amendments to, we can make amendments to. We can discuss how it's going. They can then have those conversations should Washington County want to approach them and say this is what we have going, and let them hear about their program. But as far as this contract, I think it's important for the patient outcome that we have some continuity with the people who are providing the healthcare service from beginning to outcome, because that's one of the things we wanted to measure. And I think at the last presentation, Billy, I think you did a presentation on response times and how y'all are now implementing a new program for us to be, it would be more transparent for us to see what those response times are and how it proceeded. We found that in many of our meetings that there were missing, there was missing information, not only on our part from dispatch, which is why we bought a better dispatch console, and so we could track things from, I don't know what y'all call it, when you send the truck. You know, from the time you send the truck and the time it takes to get there and the time it takes to get the patient to where they need to go. We've been working on all of those things, and the program that you presented at our last meeting just enhances that even more from your end to where we can see what's going on. So maybe at some point, Billy could come back, just like you did with PHI when the judge first came in, and do a presentation on the new system that you have that tracks response times and patient outcome. So I think it's all about, in the end, patient outcome. And I know there's a concern about Washington County saying we'll do this for you for free. Washington County, I've always said, in learning about the 1115 waiver, Washington County is set up totally different from Grimes County in the 1115 waiver. They have a hospital district. We don't have a hospital district. We all vary in some way, and so it may work for them to do that.
PHI's talking about having blood on their helicopters. Washington County has Blue Belt on their helicopters.
Oh.
That's fair.
Okay. But in all, strike that from the record. But in all seriousness, the comment was made that Billy, y'all would call in Life Flight or what have you, and nobody said, but when we call in Life Flight, we have a concern about the continuity of care when we bring them in versus PHI. So I'm not an assuming person, but whether it's PHI, whether it's Life Flight, whether it's Washington County, I would think all of those entities are looking for the best care, the fastest care, most efficient care they can provide that patient that's on board.
They are.
Catherine has her hand.
But
Okay.
there's very few hospital markets like St. Joe's that have the primary care, 911 service, helicopter, level 2 trauma center, level 3 trauma centers, and then you've got, on top of that, nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, inpatient rehab, all that, all put together. And I agree with you. People in healthcare get into it usually for the right reasons, to take care of the patients as well as they can. The tools that come along with that journey while you're taking care of those patients aren't quite usually as integrated as they are with us. And so I would offer that to you from the perspective that we're lucky. Part of the reason why I started working at St. Joe's 7.5 years ago is because I was impressed with the fact that it's not a hospital company. It's not a hospital. It's the patient takes a true great journey through all those facets of healthcare, and we all know each other and we work together because we're on the same team. We're all St. Joe's.
Yeah. And I remember you sharing that with me in our first introduction. I remember that, along with the no coffee. But but the reason you were championing St. Joe's because of that, I don't know, that teamwork environment, that really concern for patient care. Kat Lee, you had a comment?
Yes, when we're talking about the exclusivity.
I think the hospital knows, but Kat Lee is our 911 person.
Just because there might be only one or two people in this room that know this, there are parts of 3 subdivisions in our county who get EMS response from Montgomery County. And it was a kind of an interlocal agreement with St. Joe's and Montgomery County EMS. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. If this new contract comes into play, would we need to renew those mutual aids with Montgomery County EMS?
Okay.
The mutual aid agreements that are in place right now would remain.
Yeah.
And so that continues on. This would be, and maybe we need to take a look at the wording on exclusivity. We would continue to advocate to maintain exclusivity of the county with right of first refusal, and then also implementation of mutual aid agreements to ensure operational metrics being met.
Can I make the, John, the red line, did that come from St. Joe's or was that used back to St. Joe's?
That's from Aaron.
From Aaron?
Which
Well-
one, the exclusivity?
No, the red line
Oh,
copy.
that's mine.
Okay,
I agree with that.
what I'd like to suggest in the essence of time, because you haven't had time, I don't think, to go through all of it, is would it be of benefit that you go through it, send it back to St. Joe, see if y'all can work out as much of the legalese as possible with the understanding or having a feeling for what our concerns are on the exclusivity? And then maybe in the course of 2 weeks or 3 weeks before our deadline hits, or if it's an April 1st expiration, maybe we could can we take a vote this morning to extend it for a 30-day?
You can make the motion to extend an offer. You can't speak for St. Joe's whether they would agree.
No, I understand that, but according to our agenda, discussion approve emergency services agreement, we're not necessarily prepared to approve that emergency agreement, but maybe we extend what we currently have, make the motion to extend for 30 days till we get all of this ironed out.
Right, it would still be subject to their approval.
Understood. Okay.
And I'm not sure if you heard what Ricardo just said about the exclusiveness of the contract. You said he added some verbiage to that. And I'm not sure if you heard the
Well,
verbiage also.
we could. We typically don't add in there mutual aid comments because those mutual aid agreements end up
They're
being
kind of
effective.
agreement.
Muddle in the water.
Right, and so but I think to your point, what I did say would be a right of first refusal
Yes.
for the prescribed service area. I think that'd be maybe a way to have the conversation if there's an area that needs to be discussed.
Did you understand that, John?
I wrote it down.
Okay. Let me ask this question while the judge is asking that. Outside of exclusiveness, is there any other thing, because really and truly, y'all have really talked back and forth, you and the attorney.
I have not talked to the attorney.
Well,
I talked to Aaron.
you talked to Aaron, okay. And some.
For the record.
She
Aaron
say
did
it
what?
all day and expressed it.
I did.
He was not an attorney. Could we just kind of go over a few of the other things
Right,
that
well-
we talked about?
Yeah, and so this is, 30,000 or 60,000 feet up that we've been talking to this point so that everybody understands, how this comes into play. Are there any questions from that perspective of the members of the court? Anybody here or me before we get into there are a couple of things I'd like to go through so I can have some direction from you guys. I'll be happy to take the ball and run with it, but I want to be sure that I'm clear what your perspective is on some of these big issues, if possible.
Some of the issues that you and I talked about was the 90-day, which somebody brought up earlier. I think you did.
Yeah,
And you saw some 90 days, some 30 days.
right.
So,
Commissioner Cox, were you going to say something from?
Yeah, I'm a little bit, not confused, but the issue of the helicopter seems to be an area of concern. Is that something that's, I didn't see any reference to that in the agreement.
There's not there's not specifically, but there is ambulance defined as a motor vehicle that provides transportation, blah, 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 so a helicopter could fit within that definition.
Okay. If the court chose to utilize somebody other than CHI for air transportation, would that be something that would blow this agreement up as far as EMS services?
Well, and let me say, if I can, Carter, the first paragraph, under paragraph 2 is letter A, and it says that St. Joe's will be the exclusive provider of EMS services. So helicopter transport would qualify, and so that's what they're asking.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that Ricardo indicated was they'd have to sit down and have a conversation about how that would impact this deal or their arrangement with us. My suspicion would be they'd say if we're losing dollars there and we're keeping our heads above water as it is, there's going to have to be some compensation for the loss of that. But I think I've heard more that they've suggested the continuum of care is really what is at issue, and the how patients are treated and potentially the safety or the welfare of the patient. That's what I've heard.
And we're not just, and I'm only speaking for me, I'm not reaching for the shiny object out there. I don't know how many times we would use them for fire suppression or high water. I mean, that's crystal ball stuff. We might go into a 10-year drought, and we don't have any floods. Of course, we probably have the fires, but, so I'm just thinking of the benefit, the opportunity of benefit to the citizens, but in no way, and I'll say it again, I don't want to jeopardize our relationship with St. Joe's because it is a good, strong relationship, and I think having a hospital in Navasota is more important than having fire or high water rescue or criminal search. I'll put it like that.
And I'm very proud of the investment that CHI has made in Navasota, because recently they acquired the medical center. So, they're digging their heels into our area, and we're very fortunate because many of the counties surrounding us don't have the same services that we have. They don't have EMS services. They don't have hospital. They don't have a medical center, and all of those things, when you don't have them, can be frightening. So at the same time, I appreciate Washington County building a program with Grimes County in mind. We also talked about they also said they had the capacity later to come back to Grimes County once they're operational or whatever, to talk about this again, because they're building this. This isn't anything that's just already in play. So it would concern me that we're basing this contract on Washington County, who hasn't even began a program, and that we can measure. We're able to measure what they're doing. We're able to measure the impact that this organization has had in our community. I don't want to jeopardize it over something that Washington County, which is a whole nother community, is doing, and I don't know all the nuts and bolts of how their organization works, but, we've been learning, we've been working, we've been growing together, so that would concern me too, Commissioner Cox.
What Washington County is offering or is planning in the future is certainly attractive to anybody in healthcare and the other areas that are identified with the services that they plan. But I'm right there with you. I mean, the continuity of care that is vitally important. And I mean, these conversations, I want to commend you and Commissioner Mallett and y'all for sitting down and talking and working through these, because they're life and death situations or discussions that take place far from any injury or accident or illness. And I certainly appreciate the fact that there are people that are willing to sit down and have these discussions. I'm with you. I don't want to jeopardize the agreement in any way with the services that are provided, that you provide in the county now. Those are just a couple of my opinions on going forward. You'd ask where I stand on it. So, I mean, I don't, I wouldn't want this whole agreement to be hinged on whether or not we use a helicopter when we're already using a helicopter that's in the same system, that everybody works symbiotically. I think I heard that term for patient care.
And just the reason that you need to address now is this is at least a 5-year deal. So, I mean, you're signing up to say they're exclusive for 5 years.
Yeah.
So, just want to be sure that everybody's on the same page. If you want, I'll go through the few things that stood out to me, and you can make your comments to me or to the crowd, and we can all try to be sure we're on the same page.
Are you going to go through the red line copy?
I am. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Would you refer to page numbers?
Sure,
All
page
right.
3, start at page 3. You can look back, some of the definitions were removed. I'm assuming that may be because the words that were defined may not apply. But starting at the top, you see transfer truck has been defined. Let's take a look at that. We just talked about paragraph 2A. where we have exclusivity, and so that becomes, that is significant, obviously. There's a few words there, but it's significant to be sure we're on the same page as what you want to do. Now, in the margin, a little bit, about halfway down the page, I guess, it says deleted, and then that's the provision that says with 90 days notice, either party could walk away. They've deleted that. So either it's going to terminate because there's been a breach, or it's going to terminate because 60 days prior to the 5-year anniversary or one of the extensions, we send a notice or they send a notice, or pursuant to that paragraph C1, that there's a mutual agreement to walk away. So we talked about that earlier. The judge said he had some concerns about removing that provision. I don't know where you stand on that, and maybe you haven't had enough time to ponder that.
And John, if I may, that provision was removed by our attorney. She didn't give me any reasons as to why. When I went back and created the red line copy, I saw that it had been removed. She had also, we have a more updated EMS contracts that she took it from. So I definitely think we should have a conversation with her, you, me, and her, to figure out a little bit more behind that, because that may not be a non-issue, but I need to get a little bit more feedback as to why.
Okay.
That was
And
removed.
I would certainly understand if St. Joe's position was, we don't want the county to be able to walk away from the deal. But you also have St. Joe's tied to this, and you wouldn't want them to walk away from the deal either. So maybe we just need to give that further thought. Now, understand, of course, each one of the members of the court, you're welcome to communicate with me, as long as you're not, sending it
Collectively.
to other members, yeah. But, so if you have concerns after today that you want to communicate to me individually, feel free to do that. And I'll certainly be talking to Aaron about that provision. Okay, so move down. I'm going to talk about these collectively, if I might. That paragraph D that's at the bottom of page 3, and then turn to the next page. It continues all the way on to the paragraph 3. It seems to me what we're trying to do is make those provisions essentially mutual or the same for both parties, and that is upon a default, how is it that, or when is it that you're entitled to terminate the agreement? What we talked about at the table in our meeting, at least on one occasion, if not two, was how to set up a procedure or protocol where if we believe there's been a breach, what notification is made, what opportunity to cure should there be, and how does the conversation take place between the parties to try to resolve that so that it doesn't happen again. So you see in paragraph D on the bottom of page 3, there's the mention of 30 days right to cure, and then the paragraph at the top of 4 says it's 90 days. So those are not consistent. So those need to be made consistent. There's some redundancy there. That paragraph that's new at the top of page 4 seems to echo the things that are in paragraph D1, but it goes on to add, county will have the opportunity to discuss the breach and propose remedies with St. Joe's. I would like some clarity. I'd like some more specificity to that, and that says who we contact, when we contact, when the meeting, how many days the meeting will be held after the notice is given. Everybody here may understand, this is just a generality, everyone here may understand today what we all mean in our brains, but when you're all different people and they're all different people, what does that mean? And I want it to be specific enough that there's no question about how we notify them that there's been a breach and within how many days is the meeting held. We don't have to get so fine as to say who's going to be there and where it's going to be, but those are the things that are in my head. It's not really all, it's not very specific. It says have the opportunity. Well, I don't know what that means, and I don't want anybody to complain that it didn't happen, because it'll be, a significant issue if we're looking at breach at that point. It may not be all that important today, but when we're looking at that and somebody potentially suing for breach of contract, that'll be a big deal. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
So in one, you're saying you'd like to see the 30-day cures become 90, consistent with that?
In fact, you're going to see what then happens there in red at the bottom, though that my previous copy already had a lot of this default by the county shall occur if, that's in the middle of page 4. So I'm not sure why it's shown as a red line, because it was in my copy previously. That should be this, I'm just going to say, that should be the same as whatever St. Joe's has. So it's 90 days for them, it's 90 days for us, same deal. I think everybody will be okay with that.
So the reason why that was redlined to
Yeah.
the reach by the county or the default by county is because our current agreement today does not have that.
Okay.
So I went in and redlined that in so you could see the addition to where we are today to where we're going.
There's so many drafts floating around that hopefully we can get on the same page and just operate off of one after we're done here. But I'm sure that nobody has a problem with making the provisions about breach by default and right to cure, making those the same for both parties.
I agree.
Yeah, and so 90 days, opportunity to cure, have a conversation, whatever that is. I just wanted to be as specific as possible. But there are 3 places in here where there's, or 4 places, 5 places where it's 30 days and 2 places where it's 90 days. We need to make that consistent.
Some was receipt of notification, so are you making the receipt of notification 90 days, or is that still 30 days?
No, I would think it'd be a 90-day right to cure. We can say when that 90 days starts upon the receipt or upon sending of the notice to the address listed here, but it's the right to cure is what we're after here.
Okay,
And
so,
I would suggest or request, I'm not sure why we don't have it in here, but it would be that the formal issue or complaint be put in writing with the opportunity for us to have a face-to-face meeting within 15 days to discuss the written document. And then 90 days would start upon the receipt of the written complaint, if you will.
Fine with me. So that sounds reasonable to me.
And it's good to have the clarity, because John C's right, because if we don't get this right, there will be all new people that you're dealing with, so. You can rest assured on that.
Okay, don't really have anything at the rest of page 4. I'll let you look at things there at the bottom under St. Joe's obligations. Now, you talked today about PHI. There's no mention of that. There's a talk about how many ambulances or how many mobile intensive care units there'll be. It says 3, and then the transfer truck. There's no discussion about PHI. I don't know if there needs to be, but because it's become obviously an issue about whether or not an ambulance from some other service is permissible, maybe that needs to be added here. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
I thought this is what's within the county. This paragraph talks about what's within the county.
But it says it's St. Joe's obligations. There's no other place that says they will provide an ambulance. So the question is, does it go in here under St. Joe's obligations that they will provide an ambulance or air medical for when it's appropriate?
Okay,
I'm just asking the question. I'm not necessarily requiring that.
okay.
I don't know if we want the depth of this, but, you know, if we're talking about a 5-year contract, and we're talking about 3 intensive cares and 1 transport, once we get our census data back, and maybe we're not 28,000 people anymore, maybe we're 32,000, and we say, hey, we need another unit, you guys might be agreeable, or your replacements might not be agreeable. They say, contract says 3 and 1 truck, you know, how do we rectify something like that if we're that definitive in the contract?
It's very difficult to predict the future.
It is,
So
I
you're gonna-
mean, but we need, maybe the language is at least, or something along that line. I don't know.
You can add that, but it's not gonna change the obligation. They're still only required to have 3.
What might be able to manage that is was there a minimum standard on response times?
Then we're gonna cover that now.
Okay, because that'll lead to,
Yeah,
if
so
we can't provide a
the
truck.
communication, we can figure out either
See,
moving
we-
them or, you know.
We got
adding-
subdivisions in place today and populated that weren't here 5 years ago. And the plans are on the south end, exponential growth down there. Once 249 is completed, we know that there are developers looking on all of that. And quite honestly, I don't see where the number of trucks we have today is gonna fill our need, you know,
Well, the
24 months, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney, but the language that you used on the charge schedule, which also will have to be updated with time, is the initial charge schedule. And so I don't know if that, I mean, we're really talking about initially what we're starting with the number of trucks. We all know that it'll have to be expanded.
No, there's a provision, and I don't see it at the moment, I'll find it in a second, but it gives St. Joe's the ability on an annual basis to change that charge schedule. So that's why it's called.
In between
So is
mutual
there-
aid,
It's on
as
page
things
5
change and development grow,
So is there
that
similar
net could
language?
change, you know. as
No,
far as
it's
we're
really-
allowed.
it's-
How would
It's three, it's four.
contractor additions of ambulances?
He was asking is,
The fifth.
the way that there's the ability of St. Joe's to change the charge schedule on an annual basis, is there a way to give the county, is what I think he's saying, I'm not sure he wanted to say that, but he did. Is there a way to put in here the same thing that the county can change the schedule of number of ambulances required on an annual basis?
It's under-
At least CHI should be open to the conversation.
Well, but I mean, certainly we could add that to the, we could say the county has the right on an annual basis to request.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna be able to require, if, let's say you had some madmen or mad women up here and they said, we want 5 more trucks. Well, this contract's not, if we add that in there, the county has the right to demand whatever number the county wants. Well, they're not gonna agree to that.
And I don't want to complicate this, but, you know, if 1115 went away, we might have to go to the public and say, hey, we need to have emergency services districts. And you guys are out and we build our own system. So, and, you know, in a 5-year period, a 2 or 3 year period, that all could take place.
What I would suggest, and John, I have to get your thoughts on the wording for it, but what I would suggest is if there's a request for us to evaluate the addition or subtraction of a truck, that you would give us the opportunity to provide the financial due diligence for it, so that you can then make that evaluation of what the cost is going to be or not. Typically, population growth happens, and in certain, especially in a large county like this one, the number of transports may not necessarily increase linearly with the number of subdivisions that may happen. So you may have population that slowly adds up, and you may add resources, but and the cost of those resources are there 24/7 regardless of the number of transports that happen. So those transports may not subsidize that truck. We would just need to have language in the contract that allows us to provide a financial proposal or a financial picture of what that impact is, so we can make a mutual decision. It's you know, it's easy to add a truck if there's a bunch of people that are using the service. It's not going to cost you all any money, but I would imagine that if taxpayers or people that are voting are going to all of a sudden have to be forced into making y'all make a budgetary decision, things, you know, you may want to discuss it further.
Sure.
So,
And I heard Billy was talking about y'all were talking about the fee schedule. I think it's under C,
What page are you on?
Yeah, it is.
page 5.
It is.
C, the last sentence.
Yeah, he was making the point, though, that that could be extrapolated to something similar for the county to have. I think what I'm hearing from Ricardo is, and maybe this is covered in the quarterly meeting or the annual discussion or whatever about where we stand and if we need another ambulance. And when that conversation takes place, he wants St. Joe's to have the opportunity to provide financial data or do the crunching internally and then provide that to the county about what the additional cost would be. That's what I'm hearing.
And that,
and just to provide background, the purpose of that quarterly meeting that we came to an agreement on is to be proactive in looking at how our responses are being, so that you're not hearing from your constituents saying, it's taking too long.
Yeah.
You know, you all know that, prior to having some of those potential complaints.
We can head it up, we can be proactive
Right.
versus reactive.
Right.
and that language is in here, CHI. St. Joseph and the county shall hold quarterly meetings to discuss operations and make necessary adjustments to the agreement as mutually agreed upon by the parties. And that's on number 7, right above item 6.
John, I keep interrupting you, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You just tell me, Barbara, I have that on page 8, letter C. Do you have something different?
Probably because it's in a red line, I'm just looking at the
Oh,
final
okay, all right,
printout.
all right, then I won't, let's not get out of order, I'll keep going where I was. Austin raised the issue, we had this conversation at the table, minimum times. I know they've done a good job now of providing that information, or have a mechanism to provide that information to at least the committee, to the two commissioners that attended the meeting. But there is not that provision in here about minimum times. And so do we want to address that, or you want to have that included in the contract? Or do you want to ask why it is that they would not want it included in the contract?
On minimum times,
Yes,
on
ma'am.
response times?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, how do you define that? It would be, I guess, the main question. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Average.
average, if it's,
Right.
And I thought it was addressed in some of your protocol, response
Yeah, so-
times, policy manual,
Yeah,
response
on-
time
On the red line
requirements?
copy, page 5.
Yeah.
In section B, 3B, will adhere to the St. Joseph Medical Service
Yes.
policy regarding response time requirements as adopted in policy 108. Was that emailed you a copy
Yes.
of, so you can look at that? And it may be updated. That was what we had talked about, John, as an opportunity, because that's something that's looked at, basically, what are the average response times supposed to be? So that's an opportunity for us, that's how the staff basically follows to make sure that they're adhering to those. The plan here was that you'd have an updated copy of that policy every time it's renewed.
And it was renewed February 2020, this year.
Yes.
And so that came at yesterday evening too, but we talked about it, and it is in here on response times. It was going to be an attachment, Exhibit B, if I make no mistake, but it didn't come the first time.
I have that Exhibit B, is that, let's see, what did I do with that?
I gave you a
Yeah,
copy.
yeah, I
of
got
that
it,
a
I
couple
got
weeks
it,
ago.
I got it. You're right, you're absolutely right. Okay, I think that's addressed. So members of the court, if you don't have that Exhibit B, you need to get a copy of that. See what those times are.
I got a blank page on page 16, Exhibit B.
Yeah, there's an Exhibit B that goes in there.
It was sent in an email attachment, so Commissioner Walker.
Yeah, it was the one we got yesterday afternoon, so I didn't
All
have
right,
time
so
to get it to you.
paragraph, page 5, paragraph C, we just talked about that, schedule of fees, they can adjust that annually. That's the fees to be paid by the folks that use the services. I would say, we talked about, and maybe I'm just missing it, Aaron, complaint protocol. One of the things that we beat to death, I thought, was the idea that if a complaint comes in, it doesn't need to come to one of you, it doesn't need to go to the judge, it needs to go to St. Joe's, and St. Joe's needs to, or CHI, needs to tell us what that protocol is, but we need to funnel all of those complaints in the same place. We can address those at the quarterly meeting or however you want to address those, but we need to have the protocol so that every complaint is handled the same way and that we can document it the same way.
I think we talked about a business accountability agreement and the process of customer complaints that are received by the county. And I think the agreement basically talked about if we had to view those charts of grievances, that we would have the ability to do that. But I spoke with, go ahead.
Yeah, so our attorney initially, Jennifer, didn't believe that the BAA was necessary because the information that we're sharing through quarterly meetings and monthly reports is essentially response time based on dispatch data that we are getting from the county. So it's already data you have access to. Her recommendation was for patient complaints is that we provide the county with our process for complaints, which is calling the main number and asking to file a complaint, is what she said. We can put that language in the contract, just saying what the process is. I can easily add that, that was her recommendation.
Let me just add a little bit of detail behind, I think, why that recommendation may be good. A BAA, a business associate agreement, there's two parties involved. The party that's signing on to us agrees to follow all of CMS's, all patient privacy laws. Along with that comes that you will maintain the records of that patient information safe and secure. And if there's a breach, you will pay the associated fines along with it. That's security and email format, and so on and so forth. There's a lot that comes along with that. So if a patient's name gets leaked out because somebody's email got forwarded, there's potentially repercussions that come along with that.
Could we have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but could we request a summary without details?
Without
of
details,
names or
absolutely.
addresses?
That's where I was going with it. But a VA does, essentially, you're signing on to those rules that we signed up for because of patient confidentiality. The second piece is any provider, any healthcare provider that takes money from CMS has to abide by Medicare's rules and regulations. Along with that comes a rule that we will respond to patients' grievances within a certain period of time with transparency, with clarity and an action plan. And Medicare can come in and audit whether or not we're following those procedures, those policies and procedures. We do that, that's part of our policy, and so what we would recommend as it relates to that is that we would follow our current rules and policies when it comes to grievances. If there was a grievance that would come to the court or one of you individually, you would submit it through our process, and I think the assurance that you would have that we would do right by that complaint is that we have to take Medicare dollars and we have a policy in place that's been part of the healthcare system. So we're gonna take care of it. Then we can provide feedback in a blinded manner for you guys to be able to look at the operation and how the operation did well or did not do well, what we can do about it.
And I don't need to tell the members of the court, I don't think, but this is a big deal. I mean, you want to have some oversight of how complaints are being handled.
Sure.
Because it has in the past been a big deal. This is the entity with whom you are engaging for emergency services, and you're not micromanaging their business. But do you continue on with them as that arm or that provider for the county when there are numerous complaints or any complaints? That you have to make that decision based upon a review of the complaint. And so for there to be no information about the complaint, I don't think that's fair for you to assess. So if they can provide a summary, and maybe Aaron, if we could add to that quarterly meeting, parties to discuss operations and make adjustments, if we could also say operations complaints and make adjustments, maybe information could be shared there. However appropriate to keep the information confidential. I will tell you that we're all leery of what Public Information does, or Public Information Act does to county documents, so we don't want anything that has the potential of releasing some confidential.
Yeah, and that was our attorney's main concern, was it was motor protection of you. Before you sign the VAA, you're essentially legally obligated to protect patient information that you may receive, and, you know, it was just a big responsibility to both of you. So we'll continue to maintain that confidentiality, and I agree, John, I can make that change with Jennifer.
Okay, and so if we could say, provide us a summary, and you are going to provide me the contact information, or the information where we send complaints, and we're going to stick that in there.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and make that an attachment,
Okay,
or
okay.
an exhibit.
Okay. Next thing I have is on page 6, paragraph M. St. Joe's maintaining all required state and local vehicle permits and personnel certification. That there arose the issue of, does the county want to be more involved in micromanaging what the level of certification looks like? I don't think you do, but that
That's their call.
conversation, yeah, that
Right.
conversation took place. Well, there's been some gnashing of teeth over that in the past. I want to be sure that everybody is okay with St. Joe's making that determination of what certification is and is required. Okay. You see the schedule of fees. Jail transports, I'm not sure why it says the city on paragraph 7. We don't have the authority to bind any city, so the word "or city" needs to come out of there.
Where's
But,
that at?
What page?
7C at the top.
Eight.
Page
Eight.
7, paragraph C at the top.
Page 7 on the red line.
Yes, ma'am.
It's different from ours, I
Yeah, I have
think.
a- ours is
It's
8.
on 8.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's on 8, but I would like to speak to, it's on the jail transports,
Yes,
is
that's
that what
right.
you're
That's
talking
right.
about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in the past, it read that we would not be charged for those. And now this is reading can't say that word, charges to the county,
Applicable.
applicable, thank you,
You're welcome.
charged to the county or city. Can you tell me why the change there?
So that was our attorney's change, I'm not sure why, so John, we can ask that of her.
Okay, okay.
And it may be, we'll talk amongst ourselves, because we're probably, I don't know if you had
Good catch.
any ideas to why they have that. I'll try and figure out, and we'll get.
Yes, because I don't know how that would impact us and our budget,
Right,
because we haven't been charged for that.
Yeah.
And then like he said, the other portion of that was the city. We cannot speak for the city.
we do other transfer agreements, and my guess is that she was thinking that the county jail would pay for those transfers, and that's not the case, so I think it's just.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll probably get that removed.
Let's see, I think that covers all of the issues that stood out to me. I think we've addressed all the concerns that I have at this moment.
John, if I may, so if you see on the red line copy, page 7, there's a lot that was removed from R through Y. Those essentially have been consolidated into paragraph A. So on page 5, paragraph A, the second paragraph. So that's why you see a lot of those changes. I wanted to clarify. And then there's also a lot of changes regarding insurance, which is on the red line copy, page 10. Those are just because when the contract was initially worded, we were insured differently today as CHI, so we are self-insured. So it's a lot of red and it may cause concern, but it's just the clear wording in how we're insured today.
And no 6 months.
Right, and I would say for the members of the court, it's the first time you've seen those, be sure that you go over that with fine-tooth comb. So, those are the things that I would like to see us change, and so we're just still massaging. We'll try to get it done by the end of the month. If you want to take action today to offer and make an offer of an amendment to the contract to extend it for a month or 2 months, whatever you deem appropriate, you certainly, in my opinion, you can take that action, and then it will be up to St. Joe's whether to agree to that. We would probably, between the two attorneys, we'd probably just draft a 1- or 2-page document that says amendment. The previous contract is amended to extend to May the 1st or whatever the appropriate date is. If we needed more time to continue to massage this.
How much more time do you think we would need?
Well, I would tell you under usual circumstances, without mold in my building, with my staff able
Oh,
to
knock
be
it
here-
off, yeah, that's it.
be here, without virus issues, without all of those things, we'd be talking about a week, I would think, to get it done. But who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to happen next? I'll just leave it at that. I would be happy to try to get it done within a week, but I just couldn't promise that.
So what I hear you suggesting maybe is to go ahead and try to work with St. Joseph on an extension for 30 days.
Let's go to 4/22. That'd be April 22nd. That would be our 4th Wednesday. That's a commissioner's court. If we're ready, we could put it on the agenda to get a final approval.
That'd be fine with me. When I say who knows what's going to happen, at this point, we're seeing more and more things closing,
Yeah.
and we're seeing more and more folks not congregating, and so I don't want to presume that this is going to get done, and 4/22 that may be a problem, but then we just do another extension if needed.
So do you approach them with the extension or?
Well, if you want to make the motion today, they're here, so they're here, you make the motion, and I'm sure they can tell us right now whether they're amenable to that, but they may want to talk with their lawyer first.
Yeah, I would just suggest 60 days if possible, just because, like you said, I mean, we're Aaron's part of our administrative team for the market, and so our life over the last couple of weeks has been extremely different, and I just don't want to under-deliver.
Commissioner?
Okay.
And we can approve it before the 60 days and have it
Right.
begin immediately upon approval, right?
Right, exactly right. The issue, in my opinion, is if we were happy with the contract before, we're happy with the contract staying in place, continue to be the rates, the previous rates, and so it may make you unhappy if you want more time. Far be it from us to stop you from asking for more time.
That also is helpful, because our attorney is in Houston, in our Houston market, and she's very bogged down right now with things that are going on in that market, so that'll give me some time.
Okay.
Because John, I'd really like to get her on the phone with you,
May,
Okay.
so that
May
we can do
27th.
one final legal pass on this.
That'd be a regular Commissioners Court.
I've heard that somewhere.
I may put it in the contract.
Okay,
Well-
Commissioner Walker has a motion to make.
At this time, I'd like to make the motion that we approve an extension of 60 days, which we're looking at May 27th, 2020, to discuss and approve the emergency services. I said that wrong. I'm offering an extension on the emergency services agreement between CHI St. Joseph and Grimes County.
And you said 60 days, and then you said May 27th.
Well-
Is it?
I picked May 27th because that's the last Commissioners Court in May, and it's close to
I got
the
you. So-
60-day mark.
So May 27th is the day.
Something like that, 40.
Okay.
We'll shoot for that, and if we need to extend past that, we can talk about that.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion before the court on agenda item number 2 by Commissioner Walker, seconded by Commissioner Dobianski. Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Ricardo, do you know that St. Joe's will be in agreement with that motion?
Yes.
Okay. John, if you then would draw up some kind of a, to keep,
Amendment, yeah, amendment, we'll do an amendment.
you and is it Jennifer? Happy? Okay. All right.
And thank you all so much for coming and presenting to the whole court and us working through this. And I want to thank our staff and Chief Malone from
Todd Mission.
Todd Mission for being here this morning. Thank
Commissioner,
you.
we're not done yet.
Okay.
Okay, agenda item number 3, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn on that note.
Is there a second? There's a motion before the court on agenda item number 3 by Commissioner Walker, second by Commissioner Cox. All in favor say, is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, we're adjourned.
Thank
Okay.
you.